Sebastian Blackwood, Duke of Ravensshire, expected his wife to be dead before winter ended. 3 years later, he returned to Briarwood Manor and found her standing in the middle of a muddy farmyard, wearing a dark green dress, worn leather boots, and an expression that made 6 grown men fall silent. She was holding a ledger in one hand and pointing toward a field with the other. "No barley there this year," she said. "The southern soil needs rest. Clover first, then barley next season." A tenant farmer scratched his jaw. "But prices are high now, Your Grace. And ruined soil will cost us more than one profitable harvest." Nobody argued after that. Sebastian sat motionless on his horse. He had left behind a pale, coughing bride who could barely climb a staircase. The woman before him looked thin, yes. Her face still carried the delicate sharpness of illness. But she stood straight. She spoke with authority. Mud stained the hem of her gown. A pencil was tucked behind one ear. Then she turned. Their eyes met. For several seconds, neither moved. Sebastian dismounted slowly. "Eleanor." Her expression did not soften. "You're late," she said. "Not welcome home. Not I missed you. Not even why did you abandon me. Just this, you're late." And for the first time in years, Sebastian Blackwood had no answer. Because the woman standing before him was supposed to be a ghost. 3 years earlier, Eleanor Whitmore coughed through her wedding vows. The sound echoed through the stone chapel, harsh enough to make the priest pause. Eleanor pressed a linen handkerchief to her mouth. When she lowered it, a faint pink stain marked the white cloth. Her father saw it and looked away. Sebastian saw it and said nothing. Outside, November rain struck the stained glass windows. There were no musicians, no flowers, no crowd of smiling relatives. The bride wore gray. The groom wore black. It looked less like a wedding than a funeral arranged too early. "Do you, Sebastian Alexander Blackwood, Duke of Ravensshire, take Eleanor Rose Whitmore to be your lawful wife?" "I do." His answer came immediately. Not because he loved her. He barely knew her. He married because his late father's will required him to do so before he could take full control of several family estates and accept a diplomatic commission from the crown. For another man, choosing a wife might have meant balls, dinners, courtship, and months of polite negotiation. Sebastian had neither the patience nor the desire. Europe was unstable. Alliances were breaking. The crown needed men who understood languages, borders, and military logistics. Sebastian understood all three. Lord Whitmore, Eleanor's father, understood debt. His lands were mortgaged, his creditors impatient, and his only daughter had been ill for nearly 2 years after a devastating winter pneumonia had left permanent damage in her lungs. London physicians disagreed about the details, but agreed about the danger. One said she might have months. Another said perhaps a year if she survived the next winter. None expected recovery. Lord Whitmore therefore proposed the ugliest practical arrangement Sebastian had ever accepted. Sebastian would marry Eleanor. He would pay Whitmore's debts. Eleanor would receive the protection of a ducal title and an allowance. And if the doctors were correct, Sebastian would become a widower before long. The arrangement offended him. He accepted anyway. That contradiction would haunt him later. At the time, he called it necessity. After the ceremony, they entered his carriage. For the first hours, Sebastian read dispatches. Eleanor sat opposite him beneath 2 wool blankets. The road north was rough. Every jolt seemed to hurt her. At last she asked, "Where are we going?" "Briarwood." Her eyes lifted. Everyone in Yorkshire knew Briarwood Manor. Once it had been a Blackwood showpiece. Now it was an old northern estate used for storage, forgotten furniture, and unwanted relatives. "How long will we stay there?" Sebastian looked up. "We?" Something changed in her face. "You put down the papers." "I leave tomorrow for the coast." "For London. Calais first." "And after that?" "I don't know." She absorbed this quietly. "The crown requires you." "Yes. And I am to remain at Briarwood. You will have an allowance, servants, and whatever medical care can be arranged locally." How generous. The words were soft. The bitterness was not. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "The country air may help your lungs." Eleanor looked straight at him. Her eyes were green. He had not noticed before. "Do you truly believe that?" Sebastian did not answer. Because both of them knew the truth. He was not taking her north because he expected her to recover. He was placing her somewhere quiet, respectable, and far from London so that if the physicians were right, she could die without disturbing the life he had already chosen. Briarwood was worse than Eleanor imagined. The east wing smelled of mold. Rain had stained the ceilings. Several fireplaces smoked into the rooms instead of drawing up the chimneys. The main staircase groaned. Only 4 servants remained. Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, Thomas Reed, the groundskeeper, Martha Reed, who cooked, and Lucy, a maid of 17. Sebastian remained in the entrance hall less than half an hour. Then a fresh horse was brought around. Eleanor stood beneath the stone archway. "You're leaving now? I must reach the coast sooner than expected. You said tomorrow." "My orders changed." Of course they had. She pulled her shawl tighter. For one moment Sebastian nearly stepped back toward her. He had seen fear on battlefields and in negotiation rooms. Eleanor did not look frightened. She looked resigned. Somehow that was worse. "My solicitor will send funds every quarter," he said. "I see. If you require anything, I should write to a solicitor who will write to a secretary who may eventually inform my husband." The words landed harder than she intended. Sebastian's expression became unreadable. Eleanor hated herself for still hoping he would deny it. He mounted his horse. "Take care of yourself, Eleanor." She almost laughed. Instead she said, "Safe travels, Your Grace." Sebastian rode away. He did not look back. That night Eleanor developed a fever. The first winter nearly killed her. Cold entered Briarwood through cracked windows and warped doors. Dampness settled in the walls. The enormous master bedroom could not be heated properly, and Eleanor's damaged lungs reacted badly to the freezing air. In January, she became delirious. Mrs. Finch and Martha took turns beside her bed. They fed her broth by the spoonful. They heated bricks near the kitchen range and wrapped them in cloth. Thomas sealed gaps around the windows with strips of old wool. Still, the fever climbed. One night the village physician told Mrs. Finch, quietly but not quietly enough, "If she sees spring, I will consider it a miracle." Eleanor heard him. By February, she almost stopped fighting. Then one morning she woke before dawn. The fire had gone out. Her feet were numb beneath the blankets. Her lungs burned. She stared at the cracked ceiling and imagined her death. Her father would receive a black-edged letter. Sebastian's solicitor would close an account. A newspaper might print 2 lines. "The Duchess of Ravensshire, deceased after a long illness." Then everyone would continue. For the first time, anger was stronger than exhaustion. "Mrs. Finch." The housekeeper woke in the chair beside her. "Your Grace, help me stand." Mrs. Finch stared. "You cannot." "Then help me prove you wrong." 20 minutes later Eleanor was wrapped in blankets and leaning on Mrs. Finch's arm as they moved through the ground floor one room at a time. She was searching for warmth, not grandeur. At last she found a small south-facing sitting room with oak-paneled walls, a low ceiling, and a modest fireplace that drew properly. "This one." Mrs. Finch blinked. "Your Grace, this was once the housekeeper's parlor." Then the housekeeper had more sense than the Duke's. "But the Duchess's rooms are upstairs." "The Duchess's rooms are trying to murder me." Mrs. Finch stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was the first laughter Eleanor had heard inside Briarwood. Her bed was moved that afternoon. The change did not cure her. Nothing cured her. The damage in her lungs remained. Damp mornings could still trigger coughing. Winter cold remained dangerous. She would always have to measure her strength more carefully than other people. But the new room was dry. It was warm. Sunlight reached it. Her fever broke. Weeks later, she could sit upright for hours. Then she began reading the household accounts. At first it was boredom. Soon it became outrage. Briarwood was not truly poor. It was wasteful. Money vanished maintaining rooms no one entered. Servants polished silver that had not been used for decades. Coal was burned trying to heat enormous empty spaces while the kitchen roof leaked. Eleanor closed the ledger. "Mrs. Finch." "Yes, Your Grace." "Close the east wing." The housekeeper nearly dropped her teacup. "Close it. Board the windows. Drain the pipes. Cover the furniture. We will not heat rooms that serve no one." But the Blackwoods have always kept the formal rooms ready. The Blackwoods are not here. Eleanor looked around at the small group gathered near the fire. "We are." That became the beginning. She sold decorative pieces from unused rooms, not family heirlooms, but cracked statues, rusted garden ornaments, and silver service no one needed. The money repaired the kitchen roof. She leased neglected pasture to a neighboring shepherd in exchange for rent and a share of wool. She discovered an old watermill whose wheel had rotted, but whose stonework remained sound. Repairing it took nearly all the estate's spring savings. Thomas objected. Eleanor insisted. By harvest, nearby farmers were paying Briarwood to grind their grain. The manor began earning money. The villagers noticed. So did the tenants. Eleanor learned their names. She learned which families were behind on rent because of illness, which cottages needed roof repairs, which fields flooded after heavy rain. She did not cancel debts carelessly. She restructured them. A widow who could not pay cash repaired linens for the household instead. A farmer with a damaged barn received timber in exchange for helping rebuild the mill. Briarwood slowly became something it had not been for a generation. Useful. In April, Eleanor went outside for the first time since winter. 10 minutes nearly exhausted her. She sat on a bench beside the ruined kitchen garden and looked at weeds taller than her knees. What used to grow here? She asked. Herbs, Thomas said. Vegetables. Long ago. Then we begin there. They planted rosemary, thyme, mint, sage, lavender, cabbage, onions, and medicinal herbs recommended by the physician for soothing coughs. Eleanor never pretended the plants cured her. They did not. But warm teas eased bad mornings, and tending the garden gave her something medicine had not. A future measured in seasons. At first she could work only from a chair. Later she knelt in the soil. When Mrs. Finch found her with dirt across her cheek, the housekeeper sighed. You will ruin your gown. Excellent. Eleanor wrote to Sebastian once that spring. The letter was brief. I remain alive. Briarwood is improving. The physician believes the dry rooms have helped stabilize my condition. I hope your work keeps you safe. She received no reply. Months later, the envelope returned with military forwarding marks across the back. Sebastian's unit had moved twice before the letter reached the continent. She placed it in a drawer. Sebastian, meanwhile, sent 2 short notes during his first year away. Both went through his diplomatic secretary. One reached Briarwood months late. The other never arrived. Neither contained affection. One asked whether the estate allowance was sufficient. The other asked after her health. Eleanor answered the first. She never knew about the second. Then war expanded. Sebastian's secretary was killed during a convoy attack, and correspondence became irregular. Reports from Sebastian's solicitor continued. Funds were still deposited. Briarwood still functioned. Sebastian told himself that meant Eleanor was receiving what she needed. It was a cowardly assumption. He knew that. He made it anyway. By the second year, neither wrote. By the third, Eleanor had stopped waiting. Briarwood was not the place where Sebastian had left her to die anymore. It was her home. Then he came back. War had changed Sebastian too. He returned with gray at his temples, a scar across his shoulder, and the habit of waking before dawn with his fists clenched. London called him a hero. He hated the word. He had negotiated peace in rooms decorated with gold while wounded men froze outside. He had signed orders that moved battalions. Once, in heavy fog, he had approved a cavalry route across ground he believed firm. It was marsh. 400 men rode into gunfire with nowhere to maneuver. He remembered the mud more clearly than their faces. When the campaign finally slowed, Sebastian returned to England. The king offered him another diplomatic post. Sebastian asked for leave. He wanted silence. Briarwood seemed perfect. He had received no personal letter from Eleanor in more than 2 years. His solicitor said the household account remained active. He did not know whether she was recovering, dying slowly, or simply unwilling to write. The uncertainty should have driven him north sooner. Instead, he had hidden behind duty. Now, as he rode through the restored gates, shame followed him with every step of the horse. The road had been repaired. The orchards were pruned. The mill wheel turned in the distance. Briarwood was alive. Then he saw Eleanor in the yard. After she told him he was late, she turned to Mrs. Finch. Prepare the blue chamber. Sebastian frowned. The blue chamber? The master suite is closed. This is my house. Eleanor stopped. Slowly, she turned. No, you own Briarwood. She gestured toward the barns, fields, warm windows, and workers. But you did not make this a home. He said nothing. You left ruins. Her chin lifted. I refuse to be buried beneath them. Sebastian felt the words land exactly where they belonged. That evening they ate in the small breakfast room instead of the formal dining hall. The meal was simple: roasted vegetables, bread, cheese, and stew. Sebastian looked around. Where is the silver service? Sold. He stared at her. The French porcelain? Packed away. The West drawing room? Closed. He almost laughed. You have dismantled the ceremonial life of a duke. Eleanor buttered her bread. It was expensive. The blue chamber is perfectly comfortable, by the way. I am relieved. He watched her. 3 years earlier, she barely had strength to lift a teacup. Now she commanded Briarwood as naturally as he once commanded soldiers. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? She looked up. I tried. His expression changed. The letter. It returned months later. Sebastian looked down. I sent two. I received one. He slowly nodded. For the first time, the absence between them became more complicated than simple neglect. But not innocent. Sebastian did not try to excuse himself. I should have done more. Yes. I should have come back sooner. Yes. I was a coward. That surprised her. Eleanor studied him. Sebastian looked tired in a way sleep would not repair. She decided not to forgive him. Not yet. But she stopped imagining he had spent 3 years drinking champagne. The next morning, he asked Thomas to saddle his horse. Thomas hesitated. Her Grace asked me to repair the north cart before noon. Sebastian stared. Thomas went pale. A duke's order should have ended the discussion. The old Sebastian would have demanded obedience. Instead, Sebastian glanced toward Eleanor's office window. Finish the cart. Thomas blinked. I'll saddle the horse myself. That afternoon, Sebastian examined the estate books. He expected disorder. He found disciplined survival, pasture leases, mill income, rotating crops, emergency coal reserves, maintenance priorities. Eleanor entered carrying a basket of time. If you are looking for missing money, you won't find any. I'm not auditing you. Then what are you doing? Trying to understand how Briarwood makes more money now with fewer servants than it did when my father was alive. Eleanor placed the basket on the table. We stopped paying for appearances. Sebastian almost smiled. Then she coughed. It was not violent, but it was deep. He stood automatically. Don't. He stopped. Don't what? Look at me like that. Like what? Like I am about to die. Sebastian's face tightened. You did once. He had no defense. The real trouble arrived in the form of Lord William Harcourt. Harcourt owned the neighboring estate and had spent years expanding his influence while Briarwood lay neglected. He controlled several transport roads. He had friends on the county council, and he had recently begun building a dam upstream from Briarwood's mill. The first letter Eleanor sent him was polite. The second included copies of old boundary maps. His reply praised her enthusiasm and suggested that legal matters involving water rights were too complicated for a lady managing an invalid household. Eleanor read the letter twice. Then she threw it onto the desk. Sebastian, seated near the window, raised an eyebrow. Bad news. He intends to divert the stream. Sebastian read Harcourt's letter. His expression became very calm. That frightened Eleanor more than anger would have. He believes you are powerless. He believes I am female. The two ideas are related in his mind. She crossed her arms. I have the old survey. Not enough. I have tenant testimony. He will call it unreliable. Eleanor looked frustrated. Sebastian tapped the paper. What else? There is supposed to be an original water charter granting Briarwood uninterrupted mill access. I found references to it in the accounts, but the document itself is missing. Sebastian thought for a moment. My father deposited copies of major estate charters with our London legal office. Eleanor looked at him. You're certain? No, that is not useful. But I know where to ask. For the next week, they worked together. Eleanor gathered local records. Sebastian wrote to London. Thomas spoke with elderly tenants. They discovered something worse. Harcourt had persuaded a county surveyor to redraw part of the boundary in his favor after Sebastian left England. 2 small tenant farms technically belonging to Briarwood had been listed under Harcourt's estate for taxation purposes. The dam was not an isolated dispute. It was part of a slow land grab. Sebastian's anger turned cold. He assumed nobody would notice. He was nearly right, Eleanor said. No, Sebastian looked at her. He assumed nobody important would notice. The distinction mattered. 3 days later, a sealed packet arrived from London. Inside was a certified copy of the original charter. It confirmed Briarwood's water rights. It also showed that the disputed farms belonged to the Blackwoods. Eleanor exhaled. We have him. Sebastian shook his head. We have evidence. Isn't that the same thing? Not against men like Harcourt. She frowned. What do we need? Leverage. He wrote a letter. Not a threat. Not exactly. He informed Harcourt that the Duke of Ravensshire had returned, that certified estate documents had been found, and that Sebastian looked forward to discussing the matter before county magistrates. He added one line noting that irregular tax maps could attract parliamentary attention. Harcourt replied within a day. He requested a meeting. Eleanor smiled grimly. That was blackmail. Diplomacy. The meeting took place at Briarwood. Harcourt arrived in a polished carriage with 2 lawyers and the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He barely acknowledged Eleanor. "Your Grace," he said to Sebastian, "I'm relieved you are home. Estate matters can become confused when ladies are forced to manage beyond their experience." Sebastian's expression did not change. Eleanor did not speak. Harcourt continued, "I'm certain we can correct the misunderstandings created during your absence." Sebastian gestured toward the table. "Please." The charter lay open. So did the altered county map. Harcourt's smile weakened. "Sebastian, Saturday, my wife discovered the discrepancy." Harcourt glanced at Eleanor. "A fortunate accident." No, Sebastian's voice was quiet. "She discovered the mill problem, traced the boundary changes, located the old references, and kept this estate solvent long enough for me to come home and pretend I'm useful." Eleanor looked at him. Harcourt tried to laugh. Sebastian did not. "You will remove the dam," Sebastian continued. "You will correct the county records, reimburse the 2 tenant families for excess taxes collected under your claim, and sign a written acknowledgement of Briarwood's water rights." Harcourt stiffened. "And if I refuse?" Sebastian leaned back. "Then my wife will take the documents to the magistrates." He paused. "And I will take them to London." Harcourt understood. By sunset, he had signed. It was the first time Eleanor saw Sebastian use his title not to escape responsibility, but to protect what she had built. Something inside her shifted. Not forgiveness, but trust had begun. 3 days after Harcourt left, an unseasonal storm struck. Rain hammered the estate from afternoon until dark. The drainage channel beside Eleanor's herb garden overflowed. By the time Sebastian learned where she was, Eleanor was already outside with a shovel. He found her knee-deep in mud, trying to redirect water away from the greenhouse. "Eleanor, we'll lose the seedlings." "To hell with the seedlings." He crossed the garden. She tried to lift the shovel again, then stopped. Her face changed. The shovel fell. Both hands went to her chest. Sebastian knew immediately. She could not breathe. He reached her as her knees gave way. "I have you." "Garden." "No," he lifted her. She was frighteningly light. Inside, he carried her to the warm parlor. Mrs. Finch brought blankets and heated bricks. Sebastian sat on the floor with Eleanor against his chest. "Look at me." Her eyes were wide with fear. "Breathe slowly." She tried. Nothing. Again. A ragged breath came. Then another. Sebastian held her tighter. He had watched men bleed out on battlefields. He had stood under artillery fire. Nothing had frightened him like this. "Stay," he whispered. Eleanor barely heard him. "What?" "Stay." Hours later, the physician arrived. After examining her, he told Sebastian privately, "The cold triggered a severe attack, but she is stronger than she was years ago. Her condition is chronic, not necessarily immediately fatal. She may live many years if she avoids damp, exhaustion, and winter exposure." Sebastian closed his eyes. Many years. Not certainty, but possibility. He returned to Eleanor's room. She was awake. "What did he say?" "That you are forbidden from wrestling storms." She gave him a tired look. "Sebastian." He said the illness remains serious, but stable. She waited. "And he does not think you are dying now." For a moment Eleanor said nothing. Then she turned her face toward the fire. "That is a strange sentence to hear after building your life around the expectation that you are." Sebastian sat beside her. "I built mine around the expectation too." She looked at him. "I know." Shame crossed his face. This time she did not look away. During the next week, Sebastian moved his work into her parlor. He handled correspondence. He checked the mill. He took over the winter inventory without announcing that he was doing so to force her to rest. At night, if she woke coughing, she sometimes found a cup of warm tea beside the bed. He did not hover. He did not pity her. He simply stayed. Then, one night, thunder rolled over Briarwood. Eleanor woke to a crash from Sebastian's room. She found the door partly open. Inside, a chair lay overturned. Sebastian stood in the corner barefoot, wearing only trousers and a linen shirt. His eyes were open, but he was not in Briarwood. Hold the line. Thunder cracked. He dropped to one knee. They're coming through the smoke. Eleanor froze. This was not the controlled diplomat London celebrated. This was a man trapped somewhere else. She entered slowly. Sebastian. He jerked toward her. For one terrible second, he did not recognize her. She stopped. Instead of touching him, she lowered herself to the floor several feet away. The guns are gone. His chest heaved. You're in Yorkshire. Rain struck the windows. Look at the hearth. His eyes shifted. Look at me. He did. You're home. His face collapsed. I sent them into the marsh. Eleanor stayed silent. 400 men. His voice broke. The fog was too thick. I approved the route. By the time we understood the ground, they were trapped. He covered his face. I still dream about the mud. Eleanor stood slowly. She added another log to the fire. Then she looked back at him. The mud here is only mud. Sebastian lowered his hands. It grows rosemary, she said. It grows potatoes. It ruins my skirts. A broken laugh escaped him. Eleanor extended her hand. Get up. He stared at it. Why? Because the floor is freezing and I refuse to nurse you too. He took her hand. She helped him stand. For a moment they remained very close. Sebastian looked down at her. I left you here to survive alone. Yes. And you are still helping me. Yes. Why? Eleanor thought about it. Because I know what it is to be told your life is already over. Sebastian closed his eyes. That night changed them more than any kiss could have. He had once mistaken her illness for weakness. She had once mistaken his absence for a life untouched by suffering. Both had been wrong. Summer transformed Briarwood. The barley harvest exceeded every previous year. The mill ran from dawn until evening. Sebastian worked beside the laborers until his hands blistered. Villagers who once bowed nervously began speaking to him like a man rather than a title. Eleanor managed the accounts from a table in the courtyard. One evening Sebastian brought her cold water. The numbers will exist tomorrow. They are excellent numbers. They are still numbers. We beat last year's yield by nearly 30%. Sebastian sat opposite her. Then we can afford coal. And repair the west roof. No, she stared. The west roof leaks. The west wing is empty. A duke should have at least one grand hall. My peers can admire the barn. She laughed. Sebastian watched her. The sound had become one of his favorite things. You look well, he said. Eleanor's smile faded slightly. I am surviving. You are leading. He placed his hand over hers. This time she did not pull away. Instead, she turned her palm upward and laced her fingers through his. Autumn passed. Then November came. Exactly 4 years after their wedding, 2 carriages appeared at Briarwood. One belonged to Lord Pembroke, an envoy from the crown. The other belonged to Harcourt. Eleanor's stomach tightened when she saw both men enter the yard. Sebastian met them in the front hall. Pembroke removed his gloves. The king requires your service. Sebastian's face became unreadable. There is unrest in Vienna. Negotiations have collapsed. His Majesty believes no one is better suited. Harcourt smiled faintly. England has missed you, Ravensshire. Eleanor stood at the end of the hall. Something old and painful returned. Of course, this had always been temporary. Sebastian belonged to the world beyond Briarwood. Pembroke looked toward Eleanor. Her grace appears much improved. The words were polite. The implication was clear. She no longer needed Sebastian. That evening dinner was served in the breakfast room. Pembroke looked around at the plain stoneware. I confess, Ravensshire, I expected something grander. Sebastian poured wine. You came for diplomacy, not porcelain. Harcourt smiled. I imagine her grace has developed rather economical habits. Eleanor's spine stiffened. Sebastian put down the bottle. Her grace turned a failing estate into the most profitable property I own. The room went silent. Harcourt's smile disappeared. Sebastian continued. She saved the mill you tried to steal. Harcourt flushed. Pembroke looked between them. Sebastian's voice remained calm. If anyone at this table imagines Briarwood survived because I returned, they misunderstand the last 3 years. He looked at Eleanor. It survived because she did. Eleanor could not speak. For years she had imagined Sebastian choosing duty over her. Now, in front of men whose opinions once ruled his life, he gave her the credit without hesitation. Later, Pembroke met Sebastian privately. The next morning Eleanor found Sebastian in the office writing a letter. She stood in the doorway. You're going. It was not a question. Sebastian looked up. No, her heart stopped. The king summoned you. I know. You cannot tear up a royal order. I'm not. He held up the letter. I am resigning my diplomatic commission. Eleanor stared. Sebastian, I have completed my current obligations. The crown can appoint another envoy. They will call you ungrateful. Probably. They may remove you from certain councils. Almost certainly. You spent your whole life building that position. Yes. Then why? Sebastian put down the pen. Because I finally understand the difference between duty and escape. She said nothing. He came around the desk. I told myself I stayed away because the crown required me. Sometimes it did. His voice lowered. But sometimes duty was simply a respectable place to hide. Eleanor's throat tightened. I hid from you because I was ashamed of what our marriage was. He moved closer. I hid from Briarwood because I knew what I had done when I left you here. Another step. And I hid in war because when every day is an emergency, a man never has to decide what kind of life he actually wants. Eleanor looked down. And what life do you want? Sebastian answered immediately. This one. Her eyes lifted. Not because you are ill. Not because I owe you pity. Not because Briarwood needs me. He reached for her hand. Briarwood was doing very well without me. Despite herself, she smiled. Sebastian's expression softened. I want the mornings when you complain about grain prices. I do not complain. You deliver aggressive economic observations. That is different. I want your terrible herbal tea. It keeps you alive. Debatable. Her smile vanished when he touched her cheek. I want the winters too. Sebastian, I know they will be difficult. You don't know how difficult. Then tell me when they come. She shook her head. I may worsen. I know. I may never be completely well. I know. I cannot promise you decades. Sebastian leaned his forehead against hers. I do not want a promise of forever. Her eyes filled. I want tomorrow. A tear slipped down her cheek. I want breakfast. I want muddy boots beside the kitchen door. I want to argue about the west roof. We are repairing it. Absolutely not. She laughed through her tears. Sebastian smiled. And when you cannot breathe, I will sit beside you. His voice trembled. And when I hear guns that are not there? Eleanor touched his face. I'll remind you the mud is only mud. For a moment, they simply stood together. Then Sebastian whispered, I cannot undo what I did to you. No, I cannot return those years. No, but if you allow me, I can spend the years we have differently. Eleanor looked at the man before her. He was not asking to rescue her. He was not promising impossible cures. He was not asking her to forget. He was asking to stay. That mattered. She reached up and gripped the front of his coat. You were a terrible husband. I know. A deeply arrogant duke. I've suspected as much. And you still leave your boots in the hall. That accusation is unfair. It is documented. Sebastian laughed. Then Eleanor kissed him. Not like the frightened bride he had married. Not like the dying woman he abandoned. She kissed him as the woman who had rebuilt a ruined estate, faced down a powerful neighbor, survived winters no doctor thought she would see, and learned that accepting love did not erase independence. It simply meant she no longer had to defend every wall alone. Years later, visitors to Briarwood often found it surprisingly modest for the home of one of England's wealthiest dukes. The east wing remained closed. The great ballroom stayed covered. The silver service never returned. When a visiting countess once asked Sebastian why he allowed such beautiful rooms to remain unused, he replied, My wife says empty rooms are expensive. From across the breakfast room, Eleanor called, Your wife is correct. She usually is. Her illness never vanished. Some winters were difficult. There were weeks when she remained near the fire and managed Briarwood from her chair. There were spring mornings when she tired after a short walk. But there were also harvests, birthdays, long summer evenings, years the London physicians had never promised her. Sebastian never returned to permanent diplomatic service. He occasionally advised the crown by letter and traveled when absolutely necessary. But Briarwood remained the center of his life. Harcourt never challenged the estate again. The corrected boundaries became official. The mill expanded. 2 new tenant cottages were built near the orchard, and the people of the surrounding villages stopped speaking about Briarwood as the place where the Duke had hidden his dying bride. They spoke of it as the estate the Duchess had saved. One autumn evening, Sebastian and Eleanor stood overlooking the fields. Barley moved beneath the wind like waves of gold. Children chased each other beside the orchard. Smoke rose from the chimneys. Sebastian slipped his hand into hers. Do you remember the first thing you said when I returned? Eleanor smiled. You deserved it. You said I was late. You were. He looked toward the house. Warm light glowed behind the windows. I was 3 years late. Eleanor squeezed his hand. Yes. Sebastian turned toward her. But I came home. Her expression softened. No, Sebastian. He frowned. She rested her head against his shoulder. You didn't come home. She looked toward Briarwood, the cold ruin that had once been intended as her final resting place, the estate she had rebuilt with ledgers, stubbornness, mud, and people who believed in her. You learned what home was. Sebastian looked at the manor. He had inherited castles, land, money, a title men bowed before. None of them had taught him that. Home was rosemary drying above the kitchen hearth. Home was a repaired mill turning in winter water. Home was muddy boots by the door. Home was waking from a nightmare and hearing a calm voice say his name. Home was a woman everyone expected to die, and who had taught a duke how to live. This time, Sebastian did not leave. And this time, Eleanor did not have to survive alone.